Hello, friends. Welcome to Heidi's Colorful Colorado. I'm your host, Heidi Ganal, a wife, mom of four, CU Regent, and the founder of Camp Bow Wow and the She Factor. With a passion for keeping the spirit of our state alive and well, I started this podcast to bring the people of Colorado together to celebrate the amazing state we call home. Come along on this journey with me as I travel across our old country roads in my vintage RV, interviewing folks that embody the true spirit of the Rocky Mountains. From the Front Range to the Mile High City to the Wild West of Southern Colorado, we'll celebrate the history, beauty, and Coloradans that make this place the colorful state it is. Each week, you'll meet people trailblazing the way for an even more colorful future for us all, making a huge difference along the way. Are you ready for a Rocky Mountain ride? Let's do this, Colorado. I have a wonderful guest for us to talk with today, Gerardo Muñoz. Gerardo, you have one of the hardest jobs that exists. You're a teacher. And I think a lot of us discovered that over the past year and a half. Us parents who had to homeschool our kids, we have a great appreciation for all of you now. In fact, we're not worthy. But you are even more of a rock star because you won the 2021 Colorado Teacher of the Year Award. That is fantastic. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your journey. But thank you so much for taking the time to be here today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Heidi. This is a super fun opportunity for me, and it's just great to come here and represent my state and represent the communities that I and the other 39,000 teachers in the state of Colorado serve. So I guess a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Denver, Colorado, in the East Side. Born at St. Joseph's Hospital in 1976. My dad immigrated here from Mexico in the early 1970s. My mom my mom's family's been here for multiple generations from the San Luis Valley. So I've got a lot of roots here in Colorado. Attended Denver Public Schools from ECE to graduation. Went to Mitchell Elementary, Steck Elementary, Cole Middle School, and the Manual High School. If there are any Manual Thunderbolts out there. Would love to hear that. And then went to the University of Colorado, where I majored in history and Latin American studies. Actually came into teaching kind of by accident. Was a long-term sub in an alternative program and just fell in love with the work, fell in love with the communities, love being around young people every day and the things that they can teach me. And it's year 22 now, and it's been a really hard year, but my students sustain me. Their families, their communities sustain me, and I just love the work. Never had a bad year, even this one.
Well, I spend a lot of time with young people as a regent at the University of Colorado, and one of the things I tell them is you will always be successful if you find your passion and what you love to do, what you love, like jump out of bed and do every day. And it sounds like you found that. How do you teach your kids, the students that you teach, how to find their passion and how to find their path or their journey?
Oh, I love that question. Because I don't think I do. I think what I try to have my students understand is that they're exactly the people they're supposed to be. They be funny, they might be quiet and studious, they might be really, really energetic or really, really given a sense of justice. And so my job is to help them become the best versions of themselves. And usually that comes down to building self-confidence and developing good skills that are going to help you meet your goals. I also think that when a student comes to me, and I teach middle and high school, when a student comes to me with an idea, I treat that idea as a serious idea. And understand is that they're exactly the people they're supposed to be. They be funny, they might be quiet and studious, they might be really, really energetic or really, really given a sense of justice. And so my job is to help them become the best versions of themselves. And usually that comes down to building self-confidence and developing good skills that are going to help you meet your goals. I also think that when a student comes to me, and I teach middle and high school, when a student comes to me with an idea, I treat that idea as a serious idea. Students understand is that they're exactly the people they're supposed to be.
Mhm.
They be funny, they might be quiet and studious, they might be really, really energetic or really, really given a sense of justice. And so my job is to help them become the best versions of themselves. And usually that comes down to building self-confidence and developing good skills that are going to help you meet your goals. I also think that when a student comes to me, and I teach middle and high school, when a student comes to me with an idea, I treat that idea as a serious idea. Students understand is that they're exactly the people they're supposed to be.
Mhm.
They be funny, they might be quiet and studious, they might be really, really energetic or really, really given a sense of justice. And so my job is to help them become the best versions of themselves. And usually that comes down to building self-confidence and developing good skills that are going to help you meet your goals. I also think that when a student comes to me, and I teach middle and high school, when a student comes to me with an idea, I treat that idea as a serious idea. Students understand is that they're exactly the people they're supposed to be.
Mhm.
They be funny, they might be quiet and studious, they might be really, really energetic or really, really given a sense of justice. And so my job is to help them become the best versions of themselves. And usually that comes down to building self-confidence and developing good skills that are going to help you meet your goals. I also think that when a student think that part of it is to just be open and honest with your students, that this is really hard and they don't teach us how to go through this. And so we've just got to try to figure it out together. The other thing too is young people might just need a little bit more patience these days, because it is really draining. Even if it seems like all they're doing is being on their computer and doing assignments, it is really isolating and it is really hard. The cognitive sort of exhaustion that comes from staring at a screen all day is really hard. And there are just days that I will say to my daughter, you know what, let's put everything aside. Let's do something fun. Let's get outside for a little bit. Let's have a conversation. Let's go to Starbucks, like whatever. And, just kind of validate what she's feeling and to let her know that, we have a vaccine. I've received both of my vaccine shots, which makes me really happy. I'll be able to see my parents. She'll be able to see her grandparents, and that's a really, really wonderful thing. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, and we're gonna get there. It's not gonna be easy, and we just gotta keep holding on to each other. And I think that's in just validating what we're kind of going through, all of us.
I'd love to hear more about your childhood and your favorite teacher. Like, was there a teacher that inspired you or that really brought the best out in you?
Yeah, so I was not the best behaved student. um, I was a little boy that really liked having attention, and it had a whole lot of energy. In fact, my parents put me in soccer because a teacher was kind of like, "This kid has way too much energy. Have him play soccer. I know they run a lot there, and that's what I kind of ended up doing. But I would say so as a middle school student, especially, I think it got socially hard. I was a kid who didn't have a lot of confidence. I tried to get attention in any way that I could. I had a really bad stutter, and it was paralyzing. I would have trouble answering questions. I dreaded reading aloud. I dreaded any situation where I would have to speak in front of people. It just made me really nervous and fed my anxiety. But I got to shout out Miss Fuller, my seventh grade drama teacher. On the first day of second semester in January, she said, "February's Black History Month. We're all going to memorize Langston Hughes's Dreams, and you're going to perform it in front of the entire school at an assembly." And I said, "Oh no, oh no, I'm not doing that." And I think I contrived to get myself thrown out of class for 3 days in a row. And she kind of was very patient with me, and she's like, "I know you're scared. It's going to do great. This is going to help you with all of those issues that you're having. I'm like, what you know about my issues? I was really defensive. And I memorized the poem. We performed it. And I realized the power of a person who believes in you and who believes in the educational process as a way to free somebody. And it's been over 30 years and I still have the poem memorized. So I would definitely say Miss Fuller. I would definitely say Miss Martin, who got me on stage. I did high school theater throughout, my time at Manual High School, and then countless professors whose passion just overflowed in the classes I took at CU.
All right. So do you do any theater as a grown-up? Have you done any acting?
I mean, one could argue that teaching every day is performance art. There are days that I come in and I'm exhausted. There are days that I come in and I'm not in the best mood. There are days but I know I got to bring the energy. I know I got to be in the moment with my students. And I know that they feed off of my energy. If I bring negative energy, then they're going to give me negative energy. And so I would say that a lot of my performance is on a daily basis. And it just kind of trying to find a way to communicate with every person in my classroom. But now I haven't really acted, but every time I go to a play, every time I see productions we have a drama club at our school. I go to those shows and I just remember how good it felt to be on stage. And really that sports and theater really helped me to address just problems that I would have to face in life and, making something happen. So I would say that it's just something I use every day.
That's wonderful. And I can imagine that's part of why you're such a successful teacher. Maybe your theater background helped with that. I saw that you are working on a TED Talk and also a book. And I did a TED Talk a few years ago, TEDx Mile High. And I tell people, and I do a lot of speaking and stuff, it was one of the most frightening experiences of my life, only because you have 13 minutes, you can't go over, and they put you out in front of, 3 or 4,000 people, and you get one shot. So I go the night before I'm supposed to rehearse, when I'm rehearsing, and the producer's sitting way up in Ellie Calkins, and he's like, all right, Heidi, go ahead and practice. And I had been rehearsing for weeks, and I get up there and I totally froze. I couldn't remember a word of what I was supposed to say. And he's kind of like, are you sure this is what you want to do tomorrow? And I'm like, yes, I can do this. I can do this. But I don't know what it is about the TEDx model. And I don't mean to scare you, because I think, you're going to do fantastic, but it's a different gig. But man, once you get it done, it's like you're part of the TED community, and it's just amazing to see your YouTube video, like the numbers go up, and share your idea with the world. So what big idea are you sharing on the TEDx stage?
Well, still working on that. I'm in that idea development. It'll be TED Ed. And so it'll be a TED Talk that I'm doing for the Colorado Council for Social Studies. So it'll be something along the lines of the importance of storytelling in history. And so it'll be around my work as a history teacher and ways that we can kind of bring history to life. So haven't identified that through line yet. I think that's the next lesson. But I'm super excited because I'll be doing that, and then I'll be leading a cohort after that. So that is going to be really exciting. But I love the TED model. I love to talk. I think that's probably obvious by now. But I love the model that they have, where they have you brainstorm ideas and treat your ideas as if they're serious, real ideas, not just goofy brainstorms that you had, and to really develop those ideas. And so really what's been powerful for me about the TED process is the type of reflection that it requires. And just kind of the accountability of being in front of a big audience. So I'm super psyched. I can't wait. I'm gonna have to find your TED Talk now, so I can kind of see how it's done.
Hopefully it's buried on the internet somewhere right now, but one of the theme of my TED Talk is the art of the comeback. And it was from my experience in my pediatrician's office, telling me that, to help kids that are really struggling, turn them outward and have them focus on a bigger world. And I wonder how you instill that in the the students that you teach, like what their role is in society, especially right now. It's just a really tough time. There's so many just really important issues that we're trying to tackle. How do you navigate that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw an insight, and I actually don't know if it's mathematically or statistically accurate, but that sort of argues that 80% of what we're going to be doing in 10 years doesn't exist yet. And when I share that with students, it scares them because I think they would like to just have a pre-decided, this is where you're going and this is how you get there. But I think now more than ever, our world needs creative folks. Our world needs folks who are willing to take different approaches to address the challenges that we have, but also the opportunities that we have. And, in short, I think that my classroom is designed for what I call the practice of freedom, which is they will be free people in short order. If they're seventh graders, 5 years, they will be legally free to do whatever they want. They'll be able to stay out late. They'll be able to go wherever they want to. If they don't live with their parents, they won't have a curfew, those kinds of things. But I think that knowing that the students that I work with will be free people, we practice what we do with that freedom. How does a free person express their mind? How does a free person develop a passion? It's not enough to just have something that you like to do and something that you think you would like to accomplish. It's about aligning your behaviors to meet that. So if I have a student who wants to play professional soccer, for example, I spent 10 years as a soccer coach at my school. They have to do the things that are required for them to get to that next level. And so I really think there's a lot of that. I think that, there was a time when we laughed about kids wanting to be YouTubers, and it's like, oh, why would you want to be a YouTuber? That's not a real job. Well, a lot of them are making real money. And, and so I think a lot of it is having the conversation with young people and letting them know, if you want to do this thing, it's going to take some commitment on your part. But don't ever be boxed in by what you think is in front of you or what you think are your only opportunities. Because frankly, we are just, especially coming out of this COVID-19 situation, we're just going to need people with imagination who can try new things, because there's a lot of things we've been trying as a society that just aren't working. And we need people to bring a fresh perspective. So I try to give them practice with those fresh perspectives in my classroom every day, whether it's discussing history, whether it's debating who should win between King Kong and Godzilla. This is what my seventh graders were really, really into the other day. Whatever it is, let's do what free people do. And if you make a mistake right now, it's not as costly as if you make a mistake as an adult. Like now you do something the wrong way, you do an experiment that doesn't work out, it's fine. You learn from it and you kind of move on. And I just want them to develop that mindset.
I'm so happy to hear that. That's something I don't hear the news, entertainment. A lot of folks talk about is teaching kids how to be brave and fearless and find their
Yeah.
voice and be confident. And it's why I started a company with my older daughter called She Factor. And it's really about
Mm,
providing young women like the tools and skills to be confident and to not be afraid to
yeah,
fail, because you and I both know it takes a lot of, risk and fit. Like you have to go out and fail in order to find, your
period.
success and your true happiness. And I think I
Yeah,
just
100%.
noticed that young people walked around a lot of times like deer in headlights, like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And I think it's an amazing time to be alive, right? There's so many different options. It's
Yeah,
almost paralyzing, but
yeah,
that's a really interesting
absolutely.
conversation. I want to ask you something related to that, and then I want to shift over to our great state that we live in and ask you a couple questions there. But
Right.
how does history tie to teaching kids how to be in the workforce of the future? Because I think it's so important that our students understand our history.
Yeah. Well, I think that probably the most valuable learning that I've had as a history educator over these almost 22 years that I've been teaching is that history is about perspectives. History is about understanding how people felt, what they were saying to each other during a given moment. How did they make sense of their surroundings? And, how are others feeling at that same time? So I think history gives us the practice of understanding perspectives. And I think that in an economy and in a working world that is increasingly pushing people to collaborate and work in teams together. You know, we see this all the time when they ask Fortune 500 CEOs, what is the skill that you most value when you're looking at a hire? They'll frequently say, we need people who can work in teams. And in order to work in teams, you have to understand people's perspectives. And I would say that I don't have the same opinions as every teacher that I work with, but at the end of the day, we have to be able to work through our differences, respect the fact that we all developed our opinions and our ideas through real lived experiences, and understand where a person's coming from. And I think history really does give you that ability to understand where someone was coming from. You know, if we look at if we look at the greats, right, some of the legendary historical figures, they didn't wake up one morning and say, oh, it's 9 o'clock. This is when I'm supposed to become Alexander the Great and conquer the known world. These were human beings with human insecurities and with human pain and human emotion that were doing what they could to address the situation around them. And the same thing can be said for some of history's villains. History's villains didn't necessarily go into their lives saying, I'm going to be the worst villain ever in the history of the world. They had circumstances put in front of them, and they responded to those circumstances in a way that made perfect sense to them. And I think that's the power of studying history, is understanding that 100% of what a person does and says makes perfect sense to that person. So how do we develop empathy, and how do we understand how maybe to avoid certain paths? You know, and it's a lot of arguing and debating, and that's really fun, because the more you study history, the less you realize that there are answers. You know, everybody lives their personal history, and everybody lives in a moment. I did a project. I do a Women in History Tournament of Champions in the spirit of March Madness with my students. And so they pick a woman from history and enter her into a 64 individual tournament. And, you know, it's just voting that that kind of gets them through. And one young woman in my class asked me, does it have to be somebody famous? And I said, who are you thinking? And she said, I was thinking about putting my grandmother in this tournament. And I was like, absolutely. Because the only thing that your grandmother doesn't have that Helen of Troy has is someone to tell her story. And you get to tell that story, and it's great. So so I think there is a lot of that, is just recognizing that people live incredible lives, and history gives us an opportunity to understand them, and by extension, understand our own humanity. And that's, I think, what is needed going forward. We need people who are willing to understand each other's humanity.
Oh my gosh, Gerardo, now I know why you won Colorado Teacher of the Year. That was so beautifully said. And it's a message
Thank you.
everybody needs to hear right now. And, you know, our
Yeah.
state is definitely going through a tough time like the rest of our country. But
Yeah.
specifically, when people talk to you about the essence of Colorado, or if you had to describe to a student that just moved here from, I don't know, Illinois or Florida or Texas, how would you talk to them about Colorado, or what the gifts of Colorado are?
Well, I would say they made the right move, first of all. Um, so I think the first thing I would probably say to a student is make sure you hydrate. It's really dry up here, and you make sure you drink enough water. Yeah, I mean, I think Colorado, like a lot of other states that are not on the coast, Colorado is far more complex and far more interesting than people realize, and that we have got little pockets of incredible history and culture, you know, a state that has so much to offer. You know, the culture you experience where I live in the city of Denver is going to be really different from the culture you experience on the Eastern Plains, which will be really different from the experience of culture that you have on the Western Slope, in different areas, the mountain towns versus kind of the bigger cities. And I would just say, drink it all up, because whatever you think Colorado is, it is more, and there's more variety and more depth. One of my favorite things to talk to my students about is I grew up in the Five Points area down in East Denver, And one of my favorite things that I was able to do in graduate school was dive into the archives of the Blair Caldwell African American History Museum. And I wrote a paper on Rachel B. Knoll, who was this incredible innovator and civil rights leader in Denver schools. And I was able to talk to my students about Rachel B. Knoll, and they were like, why don't we study her like in our history classes? And I'm saying, because people think Colorado's not that big of a deal, but there's this amazing history. During the 20s and 30s, there was a vibrant jazz scene. Duke Ellington, Fletcher Henderson, Count Basie all played at the casino in the same week. And these are things that you just don't imagine are happening in Denver. So I would say that Colorado just has an incredible rich history. The mountains are beautiful. You can, if you drive for less than an hour, you're in the mountains and you get away from all the madness. And I would just say that Colorado people are probably not what you think they are. You probably have a stereotype. You probably think we're all cowboys. We have cowboys, and I got friends who are cowboys. But there's more to us. We are just as interesting and diverse and just deep as people in any other place.
So my last question for you is, what's the most Colorado thing you've ever done?
Man, well, I've been here for 45 years, so my experience is by no means representative. So the short answer to that is that in the blizzard of '82, we skied from my house in Five Points to my grandmother's house in Park Hill, like cross country skied.
Oh my God.
And I feel like that was just a really Colorado thing to do. But that kind of relates to a much deeper spiritual experience that I've had as a kid who was fortunate enough to grow up in Denver, Colorado. Now, like a lot of high school kids, I wanted to get out of here. I wanted to go somewhere cool. I applied to school in Chicago and New York and Miami and LA. None of those worked out. And I think that was, there's purpose to that. Every single Sunday, my family would go to my grandmother's cabin. And my grandparents owned a cabin in East Portal, which is on the east side of the Moffett Tunnel, right on the other side of Winter Park. We would drive up there every Sunday, and I used to tell my friends, because they're like, "Oh, you don't go to church on Sunday?" I was like, "No, we don't go to church. We don't go to church. We don't go to church." And then I realized that I think the mountains were church for my grandmother and my mother, and a lot of kids from my neighborhood never had the opportunity to travel to the mountains, less than an hour away. And so I think being in the mountains every Sunday, kind of secluded, kind of away from everything, walking up the first crossing, the second crossing, maybe getting to the third crossing, maybe going all the way up to Crater Lake if we were ambitious and early enough, and then coming back through Central City and getting hot chocolate before we came home. I feel like when I reflect on my life as a resident, as a proud resident of the state of Colorado, that's what I always think of, is all those times that I spent in the mountains with my family. So that's what it is. It's about the mountains and it's about the snow.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I'm not a snow person, but we moved to Monument, Colorado from Southern California. And I don't think you could pick a snowier place on the Front Range. So I got used to missing a lot of concerts because of blizzards on I-25. And
Yep.
I learned how to ride a snowmobile because we couldn't get the car out for a week, but it was great. It was fun. Well, Gerardo, thank you so much for joining me today. We've got to learn a little bit about you and why you're such an amazing teacher. It came shining through, and I think the rest of Colorado will join me in saying how grateful we are to have you here and teaching our kids. And keep up the great work. And of course, we as parents will do all we can to support you, but we're kind of a hot mess right now with COVID. So you guys are probably going to have to steer us straight.
Hey, the best thing that we can all do is stick together. It's going to take our communities working together and supporting and encouraging each other. And it's really an honor. I really had a lot of fun talking to you today, and looking forward to getting to know teachers and students and communities across Colorado this year.
Thank you for joining us today on Heidi's Colorful Colorado. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. And definitely follow me on Instagram to keep up with my latest adventures. In the meantime, happy trails from me, Heidi Ganahl.